right. Well, I think that we have enough people here. We might as well get going, and people are free to filter in as we continue. But welcome to I guess this is technically only the second office hours of 2026 here, since we didn't do one in January. But this is our second office hours of 2026 here for March. We have a pretty decent lineup of questions here we're going to hit. A lot of these overlap, so if you had a question and we kind of merged it into another one, but you had something more specific to ask, feel free after we've covered that one, jump in. We'll also have some time at the end for general Q&A if you had something else that came up while we were talking and you wanted to bring that up. But please feel free, jump in. It's all about getting your questions answered, and we will jump into the list. But first, we're going to introduce our volunteers here today. We have Steve Casperson representing the Best Practices Committee.
Hello.
As mentioned, we have Sarah representing the Marketing Committee. I'm also on that one as well. But you're kind of the head honcho there now, the big boss.
No, just a volunteer leader. That's it.
Right. And then we have Eric Griffith representing the Standards Committee. And if you didn't see, we actually just posted a highlight clip from the Standards Committee session at Tech Summit 2026. So if you have some free time, you're bored after this, please go over to our social channels and check that out and watch that session if you weren't able to attend Tech Summit. And with that, I think we will dive right in. We had a lot of questions just generally about learning PromoStandards for the first time. How do we get started? And we also had some questions about where to find some of the documentation resources that previously best practices, people may have been able to access without an account. So, do we want to talk a little bit about how to get to the best practices resources, membership requirement, and kind of where to start once you get in? I know it's a broad topic. Yeah. The long and the short of it is, there was a way to get to some of our best practices resources without an account previously. And when we ended up redoing the website, that was something we wanted to kind of control a little bit more so we knew who was accessing that information. So all of the best practices information is now locked behind a membership. The entry-level membership is the associate tier. It is $500 a year. It's not very expensive at all. And that will give you access to, again, those best practices resources and our Slack channel, where you can ask other people who have done implementations what they've done, just generally get tech support, ask Q&A, and bother people directly who are in the Slack. If you know that they're working with a company that you're trying to integrate with, you can message them directly there if you didn't already have a line of contact with them. And again, that is just open to anybody on that entry level. You get one account with an associate tier membership. There are some resources available that break down how the standards work. And of course, you can access the standard documentation that explains what each standard is as a non-member. But to do that, you will still have to make an account. So if you have the sign-in option on the top or bottom of that homepage, you can click on that and it should prompt you to make an account, or you can go to the join, select non-member, and go through that application process and we'll approve you there, so long as you're not a bot. But we'll have to do that to access any of the kind of crucial information on our site. That way we don't have people, botting downloads or pinging the downloads on our website and stressing out our servers. So that's why that's in place. We do kind of want to know who's also going to be there. So please, we encourage you, if you're not already a non-member, it is free to make a non-member account, and it does give you access to some resources that might answer some general questions. Regarding where to look when you're starting with best practices and implementation, Steve, do you have a good jumping off point, like first place you would look when you got into BP?
Well, I mean, for me, I was trying to actually build out the endpoints. So I wasn't calling endpoints, I was building endpoints. So if you're, in the same situation where you want to build out an endpoint, or you want to build out your services, it's like you look at the documentation, especially the specifications around the fields for each service, the return for different kinds of calls, like for product, PPC, PO, and then figure out where in your ERP system typically those data elements are going to come from, and then build out a service that actually will serve them up. I would say that most companies have integrated with something before, who have developed services. Like you have existing customers, and your customers are calling you to place orders or do whatever they're going to do. So in a lot of ways, this is taking what you may already have and reshaping it to serve as a PromoStandards standard. And concurrently, if you are making calls to somebody else, to a service, for anything like how to make a call to FedEx or UPS or something like that, it's very similar. You're making a call. There are documented standards around how to make the call, and essentially, to me, the big kind of twist, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you can come back to it about the data quality questions, is trying to figure out how to get what you need from whoever you're calling from. So in other words, if you are very much interested in, like price and availability kind of thing, and you don't really care a whole lot about marketing information or marketing stuff, you're all about getting the goods and that kind of stuff, then essentially you're primarily going to be focused on the PPC endpoint as opposed to product, because product is more of a little bit more marketing oriented. But essentially, I mean, it's like you're going to have to dive in. You're going to have to build something. If you don't want to build anything, then you should partner with a service provider. If you're not comfortable building out anything, there are many service providers around that will do that for you. So hopefully that was covered all the bases of that question.
Absolutely. And when you are talking to service providers, if they're able to kind of get in and look around at your system, they might be able to give you some direction on what standards they would recommend to implement first. We actually spoke with some members at SNN and Terra while we were at PPAI, and they talked a lot about, what's your big three? Like, what's the first three you implement? And, it has a bit of a case-by-case basis. So if you're really not sure where to look, definitely it is a good idea to talk to one of the service providers. We have a service provider directory on our website. So if you do become a member, you can look at all of the service providers that we endorse, essentially, all of them that are capable of integrating PromoStandards, which standards they're capable of integrating, to what level. Maybe they have a Shopify compatible application that they offer, things like that. Those will all be listed on the service provider database. So please feel free to go look at that if you are a member, and if you're not, that's something to consider. We don't really know what we're going to do, but we're going to jump in and we're going to talk to some of these service providers and just see, what are they recommending, what are they quoting, and kind of go from there if that's something you're on the fence about. I think this segues a little bit into another topic that we got. We were being generally asked about what sets PromoStandards apart from alternatives, and they were a little bit vague on what alternatives would be. I would like to talk a little bit about, what makes PromoStandards different. I think you touched on a lot of it, which is that you really do build out your own solution to some extent. So it is going to be a lot more like building your own solution, but following certain guardrails. And that's going to ensure that it's going to be easier to apply across. Steve's, he's got something to say because I'm saying.
Well, I do.
Non-technically.
Somebody asked a question about Sage. They made a comparison of PromoStandards and Sage. And I've done integrations with both PromoStandards and Sage. And while they are similar in terms of, you can get product information, or you can do this, or you can do that, I would say that Sage is older. And they're, I don't want to say the philosophy, but kind of like the way that their system is structured is around something that was designed a while ago. And it kind of shows, because you have to, if you're integrating with Sage and you're going to set up, these are my products, or you're calling somebody else's product endpoint, say, tell me about this product. they can have a category and a secondary category. And the categories are fixed. They're SAGE categories, not your categories. So in other words, the categories to me are weird. Like kayaks is a category. I don't know how many people in the promotional product industry do kayaks. I mean, obviously, yes, you can have a kayak and you can put somebody's logo on it or whatever. But there's all these odd ones that seem like they're kind of from, I don't know, like the 70s or something like that, like ashtrays and stuff like that, where it's like, that's a strange one. So you have that kind of thing, and I would say that PromoStandards to me is much more forward-looking in terms of both the existing implementation of the SOAP, APIs, as well as the new RESTful APIs. We're definitely not just sitting around. We came up with the standards, back in the 80s, and we're just going to run with them. And to me, that's when I look at Sage, it's like, it's old. And in a lot of ways, it's outdated. I mean, it definitely does what it's supposed to do, but you have to fit it into their structure, into their nomenclature, into their schema, and sometimes it's not a good fit. So to me, PromoStandards is like it's the most recently developed standard like that, and it's still we're moving forward. Like we're not just sitting in the past and just running with that. Did you want to say something, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, we're a community where we actually take input from our members and try to improve the process. So instead of just shoehorning your data into like an EDI system, because that's one way to transact electronically, we're actually looking at how we as an industry are changing and taking input from our membership as we go about making improvements and enhancements to the system.
Yeah, to me, Sage is one step above EDI. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. One of the ways I like to describe it is there's like a term, kind of common nomenclature goes around a lot in software. People talk about the closed garden idea, and PromoStandards is definitely not a closed garden like you would call Sage. Again, it's much more of the open garden mentality. But of course, we do have some direction in the community where we're kind of trying to drive it, like they said, forward. But it's a lot more flexible to do so and to, again, meet the requirements of your specific business. Absolutely. Okay.
I can see the question about the RESTful APIs. Erica, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, go in. That's what I was going to ask about next.
I think we're in the final stages of our internal testing for webhooks or event subscriptions. That will be our first RESTful service. I know we talked about it at Tech Summit. Felt like instead of our very first RESTful API being a rewrite of an existing service, it made sense to work out all of the things that go with designing REST integrations with a new service. So things like authentication will change. How are we going to handle optional fields changes? How do we document enumerations, and just everything regarding that REST structure. So that one, I think we have about 6 companies currently testing in our event subscription work group. Once that's done, we'll do a final review with best practices so that this gets released with a nice set of documentation, and then it will go out to the advisory members so that they get a chance to review it and provide feedback. Then it goes back to the standards committee. We make any revisions, and then it goes back to the advisory members one more time for voting and out through the board before it gets out to the world. So it does take quite a bit of time to get through that process. So I would say it'll still be a few months. But right behind that, we have product data 3.0 coming, which is our next REST service. That one is not in testing yet. We're still working through making some decisions about how we want certain data to be structured, things that are in the existing standard that are obsolete, things that we do now as an industry that we didn't really handle for in the first iteration. And so over the next several months, you'll see us just working through each of the existing standards to try to get them converted. I would love to say we'll have them all done by Tech Summit next year, but I think that's pretty bold. I think we'll have several done by Tech Summit next year, and you'll see some activity with the event subscriptions here in the next month or two.
Fantastic. Okay, I want to get into some of the more specific questions here, but first, I've seen a few that's just kind of generally on data quality. We haven't been able to talk about this in a office hour session yet, but we have posted a lot about it, put a lot about the SAQ. Do we want to talk a little bit about that? Just give a brief redirect to it, or do we want to? Do you want me to just drop a link in the chat?
No, I mean, I would be glad to talk about that because I know it's come up frequently in the best practices committee meetings and stuff like that, and it's a, with the SAQ, anybody who was on, at the Tech Summit, yes, that was me talking about the SAQ on stage. I was trying to be more funny, but nobody was laughing, so it's okay. But at least not loudly enough for me to hear it. Yeah, because essentially, if you're providing the services, as opposed to calling them, that's your presentation to your customers and your partners and stuff like that. And so it really is incumbent upon you to have the best possible data that you can. Because somebody may call your services and say, you have typos all over the place, or, your data is valid, but it's not good. Because you can do different validation things against the schema of the different responses. It's oh yeah, it's valid, but it's this is garbage. And that's something that in the SAQ, the current version of the SAQ is the first version. It's essentially the first attempt at it. And so the idea is okay, this is what you are going to attest to, what you can do, what you're providing. And then, going forward, we want to evolve it into something where I'm not going to call it a living document, but it's going to go through a number of iterations where we want to be able to have somebody say, hey, your data is good. We've talked about having an external audit of various companies. If you're saying, okay, here's my services, then we may run an automated audit. So okay, what do you got? How many of your fields how many of your optional fields are filled as opposed to just the required fields? Are you providing the data that's optional? Does your data seem to be, well formatted? Things of that nature. And so these are all things that are going to be coming, in terms of timeline that I'm not going to speculate on, but I would say it would be within the next year or two, in terms of at least the initial version of that kind of thing. But it's really, essentially the idea is that nobody's perfect. No company's data is oh, this is perfect. There's always going to be some kind of a mistake in it, or a typo or whatever, because it's entered by people, or it's pulled from something else that also is entered by people. But the idea is okay, you really need to pay attention to your data quality, as opposed to I'm meeting the minimum possible standards, and it's hey, I have a service, your service is no good. Not because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, but because the data is borderline unusable. So I mean, it's a huge thing. And I know that, from a best practices standpoint, because it's not really a standard, like you can't really articulate what is good data, what is not good data. It's more of the kind of thing where it's like, you can kind of see it. You can say like, oh yeah, you're providing really good data. It's complete. It's well structured. It's well formatted. And it's quality data. So it's more of like a best practice than a standard. But at the same time, we want to try to articulate what makes good data and actually have people be able to label it. Like, in other words, different companies' endpoints, they say, okay, this data level is whatever, like A, B, C, D, kind of give it a grade or whatever. Say like, oh yeah, this is good. And basically to give everybody some kind of an incentive to ensure quality data. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to go into some of these. We had very specific technical questions and just see if that's something we can answer. Have anybody who can offer advice, even if you're not one of our volunteer speakers, if you used to have experience with this. We had somebody asking about how to go about performing bulk pricing updates for items constituted through PromoStandards. How often and how to do so.
We try to do it nightly, but we have so many suppliers that we just simply can't. We have suppliers that if we say get products that have changed, we get things that only the inventory's changed, to Steve's point about good data. And so we're just simply looking for price changes all night, all the time. So depending on how big your product database is, how many suppliers you're integrated with, a daily refresh is doable, or a weekly refresh. The event subscription service, that was something people were really excited about, being able to subscribe to a price update event and get pricing updates pushed to us anytime, all day. And then we can choose, do we want to queue them up and go get them later, or do we want to take them right now? So I think that's really going to change the whole product pricing architecture.
And Jessica, did that answer your question, or do you have any more on that one? My cat's feeling very loud. Okay, she's not unmuting, so I think we're going to move on. We had somebody asking about how to configure data to tie to vendor catalogs.
So,
do you have the question? I can read it verbatim if you'd like.
Yeah, I might need more info.
I still have questions about how to configure my data to tie to vendor catalogs. I imagine I have to build some sort of cross-reference, but cannot find specifically how vendors parse identifying information for particular SKUs.
Oh, product and part ID. That's what we call it as a standard. So every vendor has a product ID. It's usually the same ID you see on their website. So using that product identifier and part ID, you can zero in on the exact item. And then you just build out your vendor master so that you know which endpoint to hit for each vendor's set of products, and you're ready to go. Does that answer the question?
Can I add one thing to that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if everybody on the call is aware that Alpha Broder was acquired by SNS. And so the assumption or hope is that the old Alpha Broder customers would, hey, now we'll buy from SNS. But we have a lot of customers that would do a lot of repeat orders. They order the same thing every month, every quarter, every year, whatever. And there's an expectation that they're going to try to send what would have been an Alpha Broder order to SNS. And the Alpha Broder part numbers are not the same as the SNS part numbers. They're similar, but not the same. So the way that we actually have implemented this is that it's kind of like a fall through. Like he will get a list of line items. It'll say like blah, 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 blah. And so like a Gildan 5000. So if you say Gildan 5000, that's the SNS number. The Alpha Broder number was not 5,000, it was 500. I don't know why I didn't do that. That's what it was. So if it doesn't match the SNS part number, then it would try to match it against our internal cross-reference from SNS parts to Alpha Broder parts and see, okay, well, is this an Alpha Broder part number? If so, then use that. So the idea of having like a cross-reference from one vendor to another, it does exist, but it's not something that is really part of PromoStandards in terms of this is the standard where like you can't, essentially you would have to call different vendors, PromoStandard endpoints for like product or PPC or whatever, and then build out your own internal cross-reference if you needed that. But all of the vendors, the idea is that a vendor's response in their, whatever the API is, product, PPC, with invoice, PO, and stuff like that, matches what is on their website. So whatever they're selling on their website, the way they're referring to it on their website, that's what you're going to see in PromoStandards. And you can use that information to say, oh, well, that's a Gildan, kind of product or whatever, and try to come up with your own internal mapping. But essentially, whatever you do with the different standards, whatever the calls you make, would be essentially the same kind of thing that you would do and refer to the same product the same way as if you were using just the website.
Now, if you have an existing, like a product master or a PIM system, like we had a pretty extensive PIM system when we first started doing PromoStandards. And we started just by saying, we think our manufacturer ID is your product ID, and just seeing how many matches we could get, and then drilling into those sizes and colors and matching up the part IDs. Some of that was done manually. There were people that had to go and clean up our old product data, or export it to a spreadsheet, figure out what the product IDs should be, and then push it back into the PIM system just to get us to a good starting point where we didn't have to blow away all that old data and start over with a PromoStandards set of data. So I don't know if that was part of the question, but.
This is my question. So I just want to make sure I understand this, because part ID is not necessarily, like I look at SNS's data catalog for products. They have a SKU, they have a QTIN, they have a SKU ID master. They all appear to be distinct. So essentially, I'm guessing I have to tie to one of those things in order to do it. Some people might call them part IDs, and maybe on the interface it's feeding a field called part ID, but I need to tie my system to their system, and I'm still not figuring out how to do that based on the answer.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the way it should work for you is that you have the manufacturer of the mill, like Gildan, and what Gildan would refer to a particular style, like the 5000 T-shirt. But then within that, you have various sizes and colors. And each size and color is its own SKU, essentially.
Yep.
But you can refer to it by the GTIN, but if you would call product or PPC and say, oh, give me all the information about the Gildan 5000, you would get back a list of all of here's like the XL black, XL, or, XL brown, whatever. I know there's like 80 different colors of it. So you'll get all that information back along with how SNS or whoever it is, refers to that product. So like with the product, it's a kind of an ID, and every vendor has their own kind of odd nomenclature. Like I know with Primeline, it's a kind of a funny hodgepodge of the actual style name, color, and size, all kind of like just jammed together into one word. Whereas others may be just what looks like a random kind of ID. So I mean, essentially, if you would call the PPC, get all the information back from it, you would be able to see like, oh, okay, well, here's the black, because you would get like the color name, and the size name, and then you would be able to map, whatever it is. So you should be able to get enough information back to be able to kind of set up whatever your kind of reference that you need.
Okay, that actually answers my question, because I do see style, color, size on the field list, so we can play around with it. I just didn't know how much data. Most of our conversion of PromoStandards is going to be on data prep, so this answers my question. So thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Okay, I had one more. Erica, this is probably going to be for you. Somebody was asking about how to use the new PromoStandards validator to test a specific item. They did not say what specific item, to test a specific item.
Okay, so you have to have credentials with a supplier endpoint to use the validator. And you have to build out the request body. So you have to have a product ID, or if you're looking for a specific item, it would be get product, and you would provide the ID and your credentials and execute it. And it's going to tell you if your request is well formed, and then it should pull back the actual data from that supplier endpoint and validate it as well. I don't work with that with the validator a lot, but it would be just like going into SOAP UI and doing it on your local system. It's just it's got a few extra, like I said, validation pieces just to make sure that you're forming everything properly.
That was my question. So what I would do in the SOAP body is just fill in the green text areas with like my ID and password for the credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the test ID and part ID, I would change those from test ID to whatever part I want.
Yeah. So what you're doing is basically showing that you know how to formulate the request, and it's going to validate that for you, and then you should be able to execute the GET as well.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, and that was the last one that I believe we had. That was a specific question like that. So I'm going to open the floor. If you have a question that you didn't feel like we covered fully, or you had something else that came up, or maybe you didn't submit something, became something after, please go ahead, shoot.
A real quick one here.
Mm-hmm.
A vendor of ours told us that they were on PromoStandards. I see someone as a member, but when I go to the Endpoints listing, they're not there. So I don't know if you want me to give you the exact company, but is there any chance that they're there but they're hidden?
No. You can be a member and not have your endpoints listed. I don't know why you would do that, because obviously that's one of the benefits of membership. Yeah. But yeah, if we don't keep that list. We don't know if you've implemented a new service.
Right.
So if you don't let the organization know, it just doesn't get on the website.
Yeah, it seems kind of odd. I've reached out to them and they seem shocked that they're not on there. But I don't think they're the right person I'm talking to. So, and there is a contact there, so obviously I can contact them via email. It sort of like forwards an email to them. Is that how it works?
Tell them to reach out to me. Send that to marketing@promostandards.org. I can add them or show them how to add their endpoint listing if they think that should be there.
Yeah.
I will say I've also had some general issues with our search bar. Like, for example, if you go to page 2 and then you try to search for a company, you won't be able to see the company because there's no listing for that company on page 2. They only have one page, but it won't tell you that up front. And so there's some general search weirdness that we're still kind of working on fixing. So please have them send me an email and we can figure out if they just don't have their endpoint listed, or if it didn't get carried over from the old site to the new, or what might be happening there, and we can try to get that showing up.
Sounds good. And also, I should mention the members directory was down yesterday, I believe, but I don't know if you were aware of that. It's working now. I just checked it. So I
was not made aware of that, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, I had sent a note out to I think it was Jessica, but she was very busy. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
She has been very busy. That's why I'm taking over today. So
we use a system called Wild Apricot to maintain that member directory, and so if there's any issues,
any outages there will affect ours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Who else? Okay, not all at once, guys. Come on.
I do have a question. I'm new here.
Sure.
And we're just building out a store now, and we're using the DC OneSource now to get our data. And just curious what people do in the beginning. Is that what most people, or how do they connect? What we're finding, obviously, that we don't have all the endpoints there, and so we're looking at connecting directly with the endpoints through PromoStandards. Just curious what people have done to start things off.
So at Staples, we did all our own direct integration with each and every supplier, which is time consuming. So I understand why people sometimes choose to go through a provider so that they don't have to establish all of those on their own. I think there's some benefit to that depending on the size of your organization.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
But I'll also say, once you do one, the next one's easier, and they just continue to be, just get a set of credentials and turn it on for the next supplier and the next supplier. So,
is there an easy way to get all the endpoints for each supplier, or do you have to kind of go into PromoStandards and kind of go into that area?
Yeah, once you're logged in, you can get into the resources and see what their inputs are. Oh, you're saying like an API to
or an API. Yeah, is there an
API? I think that's under resources as well.
Oh, okay.
I thought there is a services listing. So if you log in on the website and go on resources and click Service API, I think one of those will give you a list of endpoints by company code. Yeah.
That would be handy.
The endpoints listing also does that.
Yeah, but if you were looking to not, you didn't want to read it, you wanted to just pull it in as a JSON response into a database. That's where you would go, and there's some API services out there.
Beautiful. And from personal experience, I just did that last week, and it all came down nicely. Yeah.
Beautiful. And then you just have to get the individual username password from each supplier, your own, to make that data work.
Mm-hmm.
But will it work for things that aren't locked? Will it work for the endpoints that aren't locked? Like the product data, are those all locked? Do you need a username password for all those?
It's entirely up to the supplier. We implemented those as optional security because we don't want to tell you can't just make your product catalog available to the world via PromoStandards if that's what you want to do. But if you have a login, you might get different pricing, you might get different information. So it's entirely dictated by the supplier.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate you bringing the question here. Absolutely. That's what it's for. I did want to say real quick, I'd answered a few of the questions through the chat. So if you were looking for how to get, a login for some of these member resources that used to be available to people who weren't logged in, I sent that login page, or rather the registration page, the service provider directory, and also for those of you who are wondering where you can watch the previous office hours, or if you're concerned about missing them in the future, I mentioned that we'd have those up on our YouTube channel, and in the future I'm going to have those all listed on the page which you registered for this office hours on, so you'll be able to scroll down past this week's topics and see just embedded right there some of the previous weeks, and then there will be a little repository of all of the ones before that. That way, if you want to look through, what topics do they cover this time? What topics do they cover that time? I put a question in and I didn't make it. You can go through and just click there and watch directly on our website. So that'll be coming in the near future. All right. Anybody else? Fantastic. Well, I will stick around, but I believe we covered everybody. Thank you so much to our volunteers for showing up, helping answer those questions that I'm not equipped to. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who brought questions. We really do enjoy talking to you about this and hopefully getting everybody on the same page with PromoStandards. And we're here for
Hey, Alexander, I'm
Yes.
still on here because I just forgot to shut you off. I was looking for the services API in the website. Could you help me direct me where that is?
Yes, that is, I can share my screen if you want, just so you can see directly where to find that. Screen 2. There we go. So if you're able to see this, I'm going to move everything off. It'll be right here under resources and then service API.
Huh. Let's see if
Right
I got that. Maybe I'm not logged in right.
Yeah, I think that this one might be locked to associate members, not non-members. That's something I'd have to confirm because some of that has changed since we moved to the new website. But yeah, you can find that all here. And then they were talking about endpoints by company and service code. That would be right there.
Yeah. See, I don't have that link. I don't think the resource.
Do you only have 2 or 3? Like you have endpoints?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't even have. I have site tutorials, documentation, endpoints, and past tech summits. That's all I have.
Okay. You shouldn't have past tech summits. I might have to double check to make sure.
Yeah.
Because that's another bad. Oh, I guess you probably don't have the drop down from it.
Right.
Okay.
So is that just my membership level?
Yeah, I do believe that's an associate membership thing. I can always, I can float that with our team about whether or not that should be accessible to non-members to try to get, again, people interested in becoming members. Yeah, it looks like that was probably then flagged as something that you can only access as a member.
Okay. I'd love to have that because having to, basically copy and paste all the endpoints.
Yeah.
Is a pain.
Yeah, I'll float that. We have a meeting on Thursday. We do have to be a little bit careful about that because, again, we don't get things like Tech Summit for free.
Right.
When we do things like Hackathon and we want to be able to pay out these bounties, can't do that for free either. So we do need members to some extent. But of course we are nonprofit. So if there's anything we can do to make things easier on people in the community, then I'm happy to try to, again, suggest that and see if that's something we can do.
Yeah. And we're just getting started. Like I'm just trying to, that's why we use the DC's one source, but it sounds like everybody just uses the direct connection. They just go through the process.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, great. Well, yeah, anything you can do, I'd appreciate.
Absolutely. I'll float that towards them. Just again,
do you have my contact information or should I?
I should have it.
I can send you an email.
While we were doing the meeting, Jessica went in and cleared the question, so I'm looking at like an older version of the document here. So let me find.
What's your email? The marketing one?
Marketing at PromoStandards.
I couldn't get in before too, so ignore that.
You're Chris at Jim Coleman Limited.
Yeah.
All right, Jim Coleman. Why did I say it that way? Jim Coleman.
Right.
Okay. Absolutely. I put a note down for you.
All right. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye bye.